Since we've been on the air tonight, we've got some brand new reporting from the New York Times concerning this growing scandal about Russia offering Taliban-linked militants in Afghanistan bounty money to kill U.S. service members in that country. Here's the headline newly out from the Times right now. Quote, Afghan contractor handed out Russian cash to kill Americans, officials say. The Times reporting tonight that an Afghan contractor who started as a lowly drug smuggler, a guy named Rahmatullah Azizi, stands as a central piece of a puzzle rocking Washington. He is named in American intelligence reports, confirmed by Afghan officials, as a key middleman who for years handed out money from Russian military intelligence to reward Taliban-linked fighters for targeting American troops. Quote, as security agencies connected the dots of the bounty scheme and narrowed in on him, they carried out sweeping raids to arrest dozens of his relatives and associates. But they discovered that Mr. Azizi had sneaked out of Afghanistan and was likely back in Russia. What they did find in one of his homes in Kabul was about $500,000 in cash. This Times report is based on, according to the Times, a dozen interviews that included U.S. and Afghan officials aware of both the intel and these raids that it led to. Mr. Azizi, according to the Times, quote, collected the cash in Russia, which the intelligence files seen by lawmakers in Washington describe as multiple payments of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then there's this, the price. Quote, Afghan officials said prizes of as much as $100,000 per killed soldier were offered for American and coalition targets. So that's what Putin was paying per corpse, per dead American soldier. That was the reward you could get if you killed one, $100,000 cash. And this was reportedly briefed to President Trump multiple times, including in February of this year, and he has done nothing in response. The Washington Post, in fact, reporting tonight that he plans to do nothing about it. Still, he doesn't see why he should have to do anything.
With us for more, Brett McGurk, the former special presidential envoy for the Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS. He's also a distinguished lecturer at the Center for International Security and Cooperation at Stanford University. And Michael McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia. His book is titled From Cold War to Hot Peace, an American ambassador in Putin's Russia. Both are analysts for us. Thank you both for joining us. Michael McFaul, let me start with you and pick up this discussion we were having a few minutes ago on the topic of this new reporting from the New York Times that apparently this information, this intelligence was in the president's daily briefing. I guess there are two questions here. We were litigating the first in the last block over whether the president should have been aware of that if it was in there. The second question, and the one I want to ask you about, is if it was in the daily briefing, but it was not offered to him one-on-one, it was not offered to him in person by officials, does that say anything about the confidence of the intelligence community and how solid the information was?
Well, not in my opinion. And I want to underscore, I worked 3 years at the White House at the National Security Council before going to Moscow. And for something to get into the PDB, the Presidential Daily Briefing, that is not just some think this, some think that. That is a very precious piece of property that the entire intelligence community fights over to get their reporting in there. So if this reporting is true in the New York Times, I have no reason to believe that it's not. That means that there was enough confidence that it made it into the PDB. That in and of itself is a major statement. Now, on the second piece about whether he was briefed or not about it, in the Obama administration, the intelligence community came to the White House, to the Oval Office every single day and briefed the president directly. By the way, they didn't want political appointees like me filtering that information. They wanted a direct shot at the president, and then we added detail to that, right? Now, it sounds like President Trump does not do that on a daily basis. But remember, the PDB goes to the National Security Advisor. It goes to other top senior administration officials. So I would hope that the National Security Advisor, seeing this shocking intelligence along the way, we're talking about weeks and months of time with the president, would have at least told him about it. especially before he was making several phone calls to Vladimir Putin, especially before he was inviting Putin to join the G7. Those are policy decisions, and the National Security Advisor and his team is supposed to advise the president. So I don't think this alibi stands up if you think about how it's supposed to work. But maybe it doesn't work at the Trump administration in the White House today. I don't know.
The President of the United States knew about it, and he did absolutely nothing about it. In fact, what he did is reward Russia by helping them achieve their foreign policy aims with the withdrawal of American troops from Germany, with their admission back into the G8. And to Jennifer Rubin's point, which I'm broadly indifferent to, and I don't know, in fact, what's worse, that he knew and did nothing, or that he didn't know. The incompetence of the administration is such that we see it in the consequences of coronavirus, where 125,000 Americans are dead and many, many more to come. A shattered economy, the corruption, the indecency, the stench of this administration will linger through the ages. And everyone associated with it, who's been complicit, who's collaborated with it, who has defended the indefensible, the stench will linger around them too. The Tom Cottons, who have betrayed the very soldiers that he once led in combat through his complicit silence. The Lindsey Grahams, a reserve colonel in the United States Air Force. All of them. This is a disgusting moment in American history and in American life. For the first time, we have an American president who simply refuses to defend the country, the Constitution, kowtows, and gets on his knees with deference to a hostile foreign powers autocratic leader. What a rancid moment in the life of the American nation.
I'd like to start today by briefly addressing what I consider to be a horrifying revelation in the New York Times last night. Assuming the Times report is accurate, the U.S. intelligence community has assessed that a Russian military intelligence unit, the same unit that was behind the assassination of the former KGB agent in London 5 years ago, has been offering bounties to extremist groups in Afghanistan to kill U.S. troops. There is no bottom to the depth of Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin's depravity. If that's true, it's truly shocking revelation that if the Times report is true, I emphasize again, is that President Trump, the commander-in-chief of American troops serving in a dangerous theater of war, has known about this for months, according to the Times, and done worse than nothing. Not only has he failed to sanction or impose any kind of consequences on Russia for this egregious violation of international law, Donald Trump has continued his embarrassing campaign of deference and debasing himself before Vladimir Putin. He has this information, according to the Times, and yet he offered to host Putin in the United States and sought to invite Russia to rejoin the G7. His entire presidency has been a gift to Putin, but this is beyond the pale. It's a betrayal of the most sacred duty we bear as a nation, to protect and equip our troops when we send them into harm's way. And it's a betrayal of every single American family with a loved one serving in Afghanistan or anywhere overseas. And I'm quite frankly outraged by the report. And if I'm elected president, make no mistake about it, Vladimir Putin will be confronted and will impose serious cost on Russia.
He invited only Republicans to the White House to talk about this report concerning Putin procuring hits on U.S. troops. At that briefing, he had some of the members of our intelligence community, the head of the CIA, the director of national intelligence. Then the next day, Donald Trump had a separate but unequal briefing for the Democrats. At that briefing, no members of the intelligence community in attendance. So there are at least some Republicans who seem to be willing to stand up to Donald Trump, who seem to be willing to break from Donald Trump in his fealty to Vladimir Putin. Representative Liz Cheney, the third-ranking member in the House, gave an interview to the media. Among other things, here's what Liz Cheney said after being briefed in the White House. Quote, "I want our adversaries to know Russia or anyone else targeting our U.S. forces will meet a swift and deadly response." That from Liz Cheney. From Donald Trump, crickets. Not a word of condemnation or criticism for Vladimir Putin. Not a word of support for our men and women in uniform. You know, folks, at this point, it doesn't even matter why Donald Trump is so desperately compromised. It really doesn't matter whether Putin has financial compromising information on Donald Trump, whether it's videotape compromise. It doesn't matter. It needs to be addressed. Our soldiers, our sailors, our Marines, they need to be protected. They need to be protected not only from Vladimir Putin, but from Donald Trump. We will get an answer to the question, what does Vladimir Putin have over Donald Trump? But we won't get it until we have a law-abiding president and a law-enforcing attorney general. And beginning in January 2021, we launch a full, fair, honest, ethical, nonpartisan investigation. I don't care if it's called the Trump Crimes Commission investigation. I don't care if it results in the Trump trials. But we will get an answer to the question, why is Donald Trump subservient to Vladimir Putin? Why is